Are you an REI member? I am. Do you shop often at REI? Or do you have an independent specialty outdoor retailer that you prefer? It's funny, the way people think about independent retail versus REI and the idea of a big box is really fascinating. There's some emotional components there. There are practical components there. And we are going to unpack these today on the AJ podcast. Welcome. I am Stephen Casimiro. I am your host, and my co-host is Justin Hausman. Morning, Justin.
How's it going? How's it going, everybody out there, listener land?
So REI, boy, you know, they are the, is it 800-pound gorilla?
I think it's 800 pound.
I looked it up one time because I wanted to fact check the media. I'm like, it's
I'm pretty sure it is. I think it's 800 pound.
You're talking about the 600-pound, the 500-pound, the 752-pound, the 800-pound gorilla. It's like when they do.
Sounds like a lot, a pound.
It sounds like a lot, right? And they, you know, when some iceberg breaks off of Antarctica, they quickly go running. And I've often wondered if, like, the wire services and the New York Times, if they have this, okay, if it's X square miles or hectares or whatever it is, then it's the size of Manhattan, or it's the size of Brooklyn, or whatever it may be. There's got to be like they keep a spreadsheet for when those things break off. It's the size of Rhode Island.
Is it a large boulder the size of a small boulder? You know, you got to factor that in.
You do have to factor that in. So REI is a large boulder, the size of a large boulder, and approximately the size of an 800-pound gorilla in the outdoor space. It is a dominant retail presence, as we know, and it's fascinating to look at how people feel and how people have these debates about independent retail versus REI, and it's an ongoing thing. And I just got to thinking about it recently because REI actually opened a store near me. I no longer have to drive to Tustin, which is about 45 minutes on a good day to go to an REI. In South Orange County, California, there is no general outdoor specialty retailer. There's surf shops, there's bike shops, but there's no general outdoor. And so having an REI that's now 20 minutes away is kind of a big deal. So I went and checked it out this week, and I walked in, I'm like, yeah, it's an REI.
They all look the same. They all have the same layout.
Yeah. I was kind of discouraged to see that. I mean, REI is, I think, to a great extent, the Costco of outdoor. You know, you buy a membership, you get a discount, and they're dependable and they're reliable. So,
where is it? Where in Orange County is it? The new one?
Well, it's right off the freeway. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't know if it would be considered El Toro, Mission Viejo. It's this area. I knew that they were building it, and it was kind of a strange spot. It's sort of back, kind of behind a Trader Joe's. There's this dead mall that they've been working on forever. I don't really know what they're doing, and so I figured that they might make the REI kind of an anchor of that. They didn't. They actually buried it. So I'm a little dubious about the prospects for it because it feels a little hidden, and that particular freeway interchange has a lot of traffic. So I don't know, but I'm stoked. I'm stoked that it's there. You know, it's great to be able to run and get stuff. But you know, in REI, I mean, maybe the flagship makes you feel this way in Seattle, but you go into REI, and I always kind of feel both a little inspired and a little let down. Did you feel that way when you?
I love going to my REI. I mean, I'm curious to hear why you feel let down. But so there is an REI probably about, I don't know, 5 miles away from me, I suppose. And oddly enough, my orthodontist is like 3 doors down from it. And so every month when I go, well, I don't go every month anymore, but when I was going every month, I'd always do the orthodontist and I go to REI like every single time. And I mean, I don't really buy anything there. I don't really need to, but I just like going in. It's kind of like a surf shop to me. Like I have a hard time walking past them without going inside. So I don't know. I feel like it in some ways. I always feel inspired. It feels like weirdly like that little tiny bit of going into REI scratches the tiniest itch I might have that day for like, oh, I wish I could go camping. Say, well, I'll go REI, play with some stuff. I'll flip through some guidebooks. see if there's any new tents to check out or whatever. I never go into the apparel section. I don't care about that. But in mine, apparel and the shoes are all upstairs, and everything else is downstairs. So I just kind of lurk downstairs, see what the bikes are on offer. I spend a lot of time looking at the cargo boxes and like this stuff for your car. But yeah, I can't go past an REI without wanting to go inside. So I always feel inspired.
I feel the same, but I have mixed feelings, and I think it goes to it speaks to our expectations and our desires or our hunger around retail, and I think that clearly retail has changed. I mean, it's changed so dramatically in the online era, but the outdoor industry is also changing too, and that's changing our expectations around retail, what retail can and should be. So, I mean, maybe a good jumping off point is to sort of look backwards to the beginnings a little bit. So REI started as a co-op. It started when this climber couple couldn't find a good quality ice axe, and they decided to create a way for people to get good quality gear. Kind of coincidentally, that's how backcountry.com started, where it was like if you wanted avalanche related, snow safety related gear and you didn't live in a mountain town, you couldn't get it. That was the original idea behind it. It was like a lot of these things, they were coming in like Amazon. They were coming in because they saw a need. They couldn't get these things that they wanted to. And then I would say the boom in outdoor specialty retail was probably the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The 70s, late 60s and early 70s, we saw this whole back to nature thing, and then the rise of brands like the North Face and the creation of Patagonia, and then you started to see independent retailers coming in. And so we had a few decades where I think that REI wasn't the big box thing that it is now, and the retail wasn't quite the recreational therapy experience that it is now. And the best specialty retailers were cultural gathering places. They were places where you would go and you would connect with like-minded people. And I wonder if that, I don't know that that's still valid anymore.
I definitely don't have that experience at an REI. So I've written a lot about this with surf shops when I was at Surfer, and I wrote a big feature where I called and talked to surf shop owners all over the country, mostly in California, but all over the country too. This is probably like 2015. And online retail was really late into the surf space, partially because it's not super fun to buy a board online. And like wetsuits, whatever, they all kind of fit. But for the most part, like the board is the anchor, and it's pretty difficult to buy one online. Even if you're comfortable doing it, it's not super easy. Most surf labels have terrible websites. It's often easier to just call and say, I'd like you to make me one that looks like this, whatever. Anyway, point is that online retail was late to the surf scene. But when I talked to these shop owners in like 2015, none of them were really that concerned about online retail. So their stance is essentially, look, we're operating as like a third place, which if you're not familiar with that term, you have your work, you have your home. And then the third place is like a pub or a club or somewhere where you can hang out and kind of socialize with people that have interests like you do. And I thought that was great. And I agreed with that for the most part. Like in the Bay Area, we have a few like anchor point surf shops that are just really pleasant to be in. And I don't buy things at them often, but I will always go inside and you'll chat with the guys about what the waves have been like. Did you see this new movie? Like all the kind of stuff that you would want to have happen. It's a little social scene.
What are they? Mollusk is probably one
Mollusk
of them, right?
is one, and then Proof Lab, which is here in Marin County,
right.
Proof Lab is probably the best surf shop I've ever been to, which is weird because it's not really anywhere near good waves. But they have an amazing selection of surfboards, like really well curated. But they have like a giant skate ramp in the back. They host skate parties for kids. They host big surf camps there where everybody meets up and goes out to the beach. They do. They have a boutique that I don't know. Do they still sell AJ at the boutique?
I don't think so.
They stocked AJ for a while. They have a pretty cool boutique where you can get on them.
Note to self. Hello, Proof Lab. Knock knock.
And it's an awesome place. It's just fun to be there. And they they can get you prepared for like anything you'd possibly want to do, and they're happy to do it. And you get to have a fun little conversation about what you want. So my thinking back then was, okay, well, here's the success like, here's the recipe for success for surf shops going forward, is you just sort of really like double down on being a third place. Have espresso, have art openings, have music, and they all do this. And so there's a reason for you to go there and to check in, and you feel like you want to buy stuff there, even if you have the opportunity to buy stuff elsewhere. And like the example I always use is you can buy surf wax on Amazon for pretty cheap, big boxes of surf wax. I will never in my life do that. I will always go to the surf shop to buy surf wax every single time. It doesn't help their bottom line that much. It's a couple bucks a bar, but a great example of something where I go out of my way to support something that I believe in. I don't feel that way about REI. I love going in there, but I don't think it would ever function as a third place to me. I don't really particularly want to get into conversations with the people that work there for one reason or the other. I never feel like inspired talking to them. Could just be my local one. It's just how it is. I would never take my bike to REI. I would never have my bike worked on. I wouldn't buy a bike from REI. There's just things I wouldn't think of it for. So it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't feel like I would expect a specialty retailer at this point to absolutely embrace that sort of aspect. Like, let's be a third place for people. But
Right. Well, I think this speaks to expectations and to desires and to a romanticizing of retail. And obviously, Apple is, one of the pinnacles of a positive retail experience, I suppose. But unless you're a fanboy, I don't think you necessarily feel romantic about that. But the emotional connection that we have to our outdoor experiences, to adventure and skiing and hiking and all that sort of stuff, that there's that almost identity component to it. And so I think that I'm speculating that we bring different expectations to what we want from retail, right? And so this REI versus independent retail is it's a trope. It's an old dichotomous way of looking at the world that it's easy to look at it that way. I think when you start to examine it, this either or kind of breaks down. I think it's a both. It's a yes and, but it's really interesting to unpack it. And our friend Colin True from Rock Fight Podcast just did an episode about REI and versus independent retail, and he, I think, he was a rep for a long time. He's biased toward independent retail. He feels, well, I'm going to go ahead and put words in his mouth. I mean, I think he feels more warm and fuzzy about independent retail in a way that he doesn't with REI. And Colin, if you disagree, then leave me a voicemail and we'll run it. Dang it. So I think, especially in mountain towns and maybe mountain towns, because traditionally mountain towns, but maybe a better way of putting it is adventure mecca towns.
Yeah, sure.
Adventure mecca towns where you have these shops that are emblematic and iconic of that experience. And as you said, when you go into REI and you feel connected to your desire for camping,
right.
it's the same kind of thing. And I do think there's an element of credibility and legitimacy that's lying, and elitism that lies underneath this, that we have this expectation that we're going to get our best service and our most thoughtful service and our most credible, legitimate service from somebody who's living the dream,
right,
in one of those adventure meccas and working at a shop, so they have some flexible hours and they get the pro deal and all that sort of stuff. And the people at REI aren't going to be those people, and I frankly think that's bullshit. But I think that because I know people who work for REI who are as
totally,
if you want to use these words, credible and legitimate as anybody else.
If I had to get a retail job tomorrow, I would go to REI first. Like, there's no question. That's where I'd go.
Well, you might be, unless we sell a few more subscriptions. So hey,
yeah, right.
adventure-journal.com.
Please, dear God. No, but I mean, like, so you're totally right about that. I mean, just because it's Joe Schmo's, mountain boot shop doesn't mean that they're going to be. I mean, honestly, those independent shops can be really intimidating. Like, even if you are someone like you and me who live and breathe this sort of thing, like, I'll go into any of them, but like there'd be a little like, I hope I don't say the wrong thing. I hope I don't ask like the kook question, or something like that. Whereas REI, that's something that they do so good they're so good at that. Like everybody is welcome. Like you could walk into REI having never left the house, and you're not going to feel like you're out of your element. Like they'll help you out. You know, like they're pretty tailored to kind of the newcomer. So that's cool. I mean, the independent shop. Yeah, I've definitely been in some where there's a pretty like surly looking person behind the counter who'd probably rather not be talking to you. So that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, nobody asked me for my opinion. I'm well aware of that. So, if, an independent specialty retailer owner, they're fighting their own fights. They have their own challenges. I haven't worked in retail in decades. I'm really sympathetic. I'm a small business owner, so I understand how difficult that is, how difficult any kind of business is in the new dynamic online world. I'm sympathetic to the challenges of REI and to what they have. And so I think where I'm coming from as a critic, I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who I really do love what REI does. And I also love what independent retail does. And I think that my criticism is more of a hunger for, I want better from my perspective of better, not from their perspective better, but for what I would like to see in them. So I'm really coming from a place of affection for both of these.
Totally.
And, and I walked into the REI and I'm like, I'm so happy it's there. And at the same time, I just think that REI, maybe it's not their mission, but I think that they could be more of a third place. And I think that they could be more curatorial with what they do. And they could be, one of the really interesting things that's going on right now with Barnes & Noble is, did Barnes & Noble get bought by is it Waterstones in the UK, or did they hire the Waterstones, the guy that turned Waterstones around? I forget.
Don't know.
But basically, one of the people, the guy who was behind this big turnaround of the UK's big bookstore chain, is either an owner or CEO or something to do with Barnes & Noble, and he's taking the same approach with Barnes & Noble. And Barnes & Noble, funny enough, now at the 25th anniversary of You've Got Mail, when Barnes & Noble was like the big villain in the book selling space, Barnes & Noble is actually more of a savior of books now. Totally. And one of the reasons is because what this guy, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but the local Barnes & Noble staff is being empowered to create those Barnes and Nobles to cater to the local market and to the specific needs of the buyers in the local market. And I think that that's one of the things that is so far from what I'm seeing in REIs is lacking in REIs. It's that it's the one size fits all. And so one of the things that I absolutely love about retail is that sense of discovery, of going in and finding brands that I've never heard of, finding a product that I've never heard of. And I mean, I've been doing this for 4 decades. So I mean, it takes something for me to go into a place and see something new, but like that's the job of a good curatorial buyer for independent retail, is to like that element of discovery and joy of finding something like that independent band that you find for the first time. Like that's magic. And I think that is, it's missing from most REIs I go into. And I think that that's one thing that specialty retail has traditionally done really well and can do really well.
Interestingly enough, there was a Barnes & Noble like a few doors down in the shopping center from where the REI is. It closed, and I worked at Barnes & Noble for many years, by the way, so I have a soft spot for Barnes & Noble. But this was a big Barnes & Noble with a Starbucks cafe in it, just like every other Barnes & Noble you've ever been to. It closed maybe 2 years ago, and some huge furniture stores going in there instead. Oddly enough, just a couple days ago, I decided I wanted to get this particular book, and the library didn't have it. None of the local bookstores around here had it. And when I was searching, it said Barnes & Noble in Corte Madera had it. I'm like, well, that's weird. It's gone. But it had the hours for the Barnes & Noble, so I went down there. Sure enough, there's a tiny Barnes & Noble now, like a few doors down from where the big one was. And it's exactly what you just described. It's pretty small. It feels exactly like the independent bookstores just down the street from me. And like there's a lot of local books, it's very curated. Without the cafe in it, there's not a bunch of just people just kind of lurking, which is fine, but it's like there's people here to buy books, and they didn't have a bunch of like stationery, they didn't have games, they didn't have music. It was just a very small bookstore. Loved it. And if that's something that like a big box store can, learn to do, that would be awesome. I mean, like why couldn't an REI be, a third of the size? Like it could easily be and be a bit more catered toward the local scene or something like that. I actually thinking when you mentioned that, I'm sure REIs kind of are that way in some extent. Like mine don't have ski stuff, but I presume if you go to an REI in Denver, it's probably loaded with skis. I would think, but you
Right.
can't get skis at ours.
Well, I think REI's mission is different. I mean, it is trying to cover a lot of things in big. I mean, books are book size, and
true.
and a cargo box is cargo box size. So there is that issue. But I agree with you. I mean, I went to I was in Vegas a year or two ago. Oh, I know. I was going to Valley of Fire State Park and doing some exploring in kind of that area. And I mean, one of the things that I like to do when I go to a new town or to a town where I'm going to have adventures, I want to check out the local shops.
Right.
And so I went to the local REI there, and I wanted to find, there was something art related I wanted to find. I don't know if it was a new sketchbook. And man, Vegas was a wasteland for art supplies and wasteland for like the REI.
I'm surprised to hear that.
I know, right? And maybe it was the north side of town, which I thought it would be easier to find, and everything's so far off the freeway, and Vegas is so built up now that and there's so much congestion and traffic, like it just takes forever to get anywhere. But I finally made it out to the REI because I really wanted to buy, I didn't want to download it on my phone. I wanted to buy the 7.5-minute map. I wanted to buy the quad of the area that I was going, and I wanted to buy it from the local shop. They didn't carry quads. They had they didn't have any. They had like, the Grand Canyon fold out map of the National Geographic series. They had hardly anything. I was so disappointed. It was like 45 minutes off the freeway to go to REI, and I could have called them and said, "Hey, do you have these things?" And then I went to a climbing shop. There was a climbing shop because it was out near Red Rocks, which is, a climbing mecca. They didn't have any maps.
Whoa, that's weird.
What is the world coming to?
That's weird. Mine does. Like that's one of the things that I'll get at my REI is maps. There's nowhere else around here I can get them, but they do.
That spoke to me of, either a store that has like no real connection to how people really are adventuring, or a store that has a great connection and people don't want maps.
How would you know the difference? Right? Totally.
I don't know. It was weird.
I'm sure they did. They probably did. Like, why wouldn't they have at one point? People didn't buy them. I'm sure that's why. So that's the other thing with these sorts of discussions. It's like a lot of it's just like what is Stephen and Justin like? And it's like if it's not REI can't just cater to that.
Why not?
Yeah, but it's you go in, you're like I want this quadrangle because damn it, I like to draw on them, or maybe like I like to frame my old ones. There's all kinds of reasons you'd want a paper map, or I just don't trust my phone or whatever. But maybe we're 1%.
Yeah. So let's dive into a few stats about REI because. Like here's why REI shouldn't cater to Stephen and Justin, because we're old, and we're traditional outdoor buyers, and REI really wants and needs to reach out to new people, because REI does not reflect the diversity of the world that we live in. And Adventure Journal doesn't reflect that diversity enough.
I would say REI,
we don't.
REI does a pretty good job now, but we don't.
Well, let me talk about that in a second. But yeah, and I mean, this is side note. I mean, this is something that Justin and I have talked about a lot. We're two older white dudes, and our country is the patriarchy has been dominated by old white dudes for the worse in a lot of ways. And so, but we can't change who we are. I mean, I can't be younger and I can't be less white. I mean, it's who we are.
Definitely, definitely could not be any less white.
So I think that we have to we do our best to broaden. And, one of the things actually that we've been working on is we're looking at 2024 for AJ's editorial, especially around print, is diversifying that and finding ways to get new people and new ideas in that. It's something that we're actively working on because we recognize the lack of diversity in the outdoor space, and not doing it for an affirmative action kind of standpoint, but because the more diversity of views that you have, the more interesting ideas that you have, and the more different perspectives you have. And I think that's key. And that's something that REI is recognizing. So in April of 2023, a dude named Chris Spire, who is the Senior VP and Chief Merchandising Officer at REI, spoke at the Sea Otter Classic, which is like the big kickoff bike race sort of starts the competitive season in bike racing. And he gave a presentation and he talked about some of the challenges that REI is facing. And one of them is, an old customer base. So they have now 23 million members.
Wow.
As of 2022.
Wow,
And
that's shockingly big to me. I that's like by a factor of that's a lot.
That's a lot, right?
Close to that. Yeah.
Well, they gained from 2021 to 2022. They gained 1.3 million members. 1.3 million, but 29%, only 29% of those members are under 40. So 71% of them are 40 and over. And yeah, that's when people are generally in their peak spending years, but that's not who advertisers and brands want to reach. They want to reach young people earlier in the game. They don't really care about you and me at this point. They want to reach younger people. So the fact that REI only that less than a third of their members are under 40 is a problem for them. So, and then when you start to look at their diversity, it's even worse. So they have, 15% of their membership, only 15% of their membership is non-white. And they want it to be 30%. I mean, I don't know why it shouldn't match the demographics of the country, but whatever. I mean, that's doubling is hard. 4% of the products are from diverse-owned brands, and they want to raise that to 10%. Now, I mean, there's some systemic issues at play, right? Like people, Black and brown people, BIPOC people have not traditionally been spoken to by the outdoor space. There's different cultural traditions. There are systemic biases. So, there are a lot of things that are stacked against diverse-owned brands, but I think that those things are starting to change and hopefully will change even more. And hopefully when you go into REI, 10 years from now, you're going to see it reflect more the diversity of our culture more broadly.
I would say that those changes are usually really slow. I definitely feel like I've like been aware of that change happening to where when I go into an REI, the marketing materials, the people that work there to a certain degree, like it looks different than it did 10 years ago. It's definitely less white than it was like 10 years ago, like no question about it. A lot of it too is the marketing materials. Like they still do classes and stuff like that. And like, now when I'm seeing ads for their classes, for their backcountry awareness or wilderness survival classes, all these sorts of things. Like it's not usually just a cast of like white faces. It's a pretty diverse group on their marketing materials. Like you can see the change, I think.
Right. Well, just before we go to a break, I just want to touch on just how big this 800-pound gorilla is. So in 2022, REI generated just under $4 billion in sales, $3.85 billion. And in 2021, it generated $3.74 billion, which is massive. However, in 2022, it lost $165 million on that $4 billion. So it's beastly. It has the last numbers I looked at, around 180 stores. So yeah, it's ginormous. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's shift and talk a bit more about independent retail and what we love and what we don't love about independent retail, and then how we think that is changing. Okay, we will be right back. You love adventure, we love adventure, and that is why we created Adventure Journal in print. It is the gift that we've made for ourselves and for our friends and hopefully for you that is analog, that gets away from screens, that gives you some of the most interesting, deepest, and thoughtful stories from some of the best writers and photographers working in the outdoor space. We do 4 a year. You get free shipping and a deep discount. It's $60 to have this absolutely beautiful, no batteries necessary celebration of adventure in your mailbox. Get it at adventure-journal.com. I am drinking, it's gotten cold now because we're halfway through the show. I am drinking Long Weekend coffee. We launched Long Weekend Coffee earlier this year to bring you and us blends that are not fussy, that will take any kind of brew method that we like, whether it's at home, in a cabin, on the tailgate of a truck, doesn't matter. We have 4 blends. We have dark, medium, espresso roast, and a decaf. I think they're pretty amazing. I guarantee you will like them. Check us out at longweekend.coffee. Welcome back from those important messages from us. Yeah, I have really one request, which is that if you love adventure and if you are listening to this podcast, you love adventure, and you have the financial wherewithal to subscribe to AJ in Print, that you should. That's where we make our money, frankly, that's where we get our revenue. The podcast is free. The stuff we put on YouTube is free. We don't really have advertising on our website. We put so much of our energy goes into creating what we think is a world-class outdoor magazine that celebrates people and places and things that matter to the outdoor culture. You can only get that stuff in print. So I guess I've hit you up with third ad, but it's my podcast. It's our podcast. No, really. I mean, we are so passionate about what we do with AJ in Print, and hopefully it comes through that we are really passionate about adventure and about sharing it. And, adventure changed my life. And I don't really like the word, but I feel very much an evangelist for it. And so, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, when I'm talking about retailers, I mean, it's really coming from for the most part, a place of affection. I love retail, and it's not about the stuff. I mean, it's about this collection of things that are created for us to have more adventures.
Mm-hmm. What's not to love about that?
Yeah.
It's like going into a toy shop. It's a toy shop for adults.
It really is. Toy shop. Yeah, it's adult toys.
Hey, that's what REI needs. There you go.
That's what they should
adult toys section.
Now selling adult toys.
Just a little curtain that you have to peek through. What's in there?
And you go in the back, and it's like backpacks.
Yeah, the sexiest backpacks of 2024.
Yes,
that would be fun.
Sorry, only Cotopaxi's behind the curtain. It's too flashy for the front.
Yeah.
Now I forgot. Oh no, I was going to say so. When I was in my teens and first fell in love with skiing, I grew up in Northern Virginia outside Washington, D.C., and the big ski shop was Ski Chalet. And I still remember this guy. I ended up working at Ski Chalet, actually, in the rental shop. I can't remember this guy's name, but I walked in, and I was, that's where I rented my skis for this first time, these Olin Mark IIIs, and then I ended up buying at the end of the season old demos, Olin Mark IVs, and I remember when I went in to buy my ski boots for the first time, my new ski boots for the first time, and I walked in, and this guy looks down on my feet, he goes, "What are you, about size 9?" I'm like, "How did he know that?"
Yeah, that's cool.
Like, why? I mean, this was a long time ago, and I still remember that day. I'm like, "How did he know that?" He goes, "You look like you have a low volume foot." I had my shoes on. He goes, "Look like I have a really low volume foot. I think you begin in Langs." I'm like, he nailed it. And I still, I tend to ski mostly in Langs, because not from any sense of loyalty, but because traditionally they've served a low volume foot better than some of the other brands, and I felt comfortable in them.
That's awesome.
This guy's he's a sorcerer.
Yeah.
And so that was one of my early windows into, an experienced shop person, and what they could, how they could enable your experience for the better.
I have to tell mine really quick since you told yours. So I mean, I've written about it on AJ, but it's wild how that memory, that's very clearly a very vivid memory for you, and mine is the same. I had just gotten hired on to be an archaeologist for 4 months in Kings Canyon / Sequoia National Park, way up in the high country the whole time, way back there. And I, at this point, I think I'd already gone backpacking and stuff, but I wasn't really prepared for this. And so I went into Granite Stairway Mountaineering, which I still think is the coolest name of any outdoor shop I've seen. This place was an old beige cinder block building with a beautiful mural of a guy in brown climbing a mountain. It was awesome, and it was kind of place where it was a little intimidating. It was by itself. It had a parking lot. Like you weren't just randomly going by. Like if you went in there, you were going in there, and you go in and a bell would cling, and there's a guy that looked just like Steve Irwin from Crocodile. What was his show called?
I don't know, but everybody knows Steve Irwin.
Yeah. Anyway, stood behind the counter, and I kind of told him what I needed, and he just spent like an hour with me, and he picked out the backpack that I was going to use. He picked out the sleeping bag I was going to use. He sold me my first pair of Asolos, which I kept for like 12 years. I only recently got. Well, no, gosh. I'm older than I think. Probably 20 years. I only recently got rid of them. And like everything he said was like. I remember thinking that whole summer when I was back there, like, thank God I have this because of what this guy told me. And he knew where I was going. Like, I mean, this is in San Luis Obispo, which is like 5 hours from Kings Canyon. And he knew the trails I was going to be on. He knew what to expect back there. It was just like, it's honestly to this day, probably the best retail service experience I have ever had. And I went back all the time after that, just because like, there'd be dudes in there and women, but people in there just hanging out, talking about where they'd been. And once he knew me, he would kind of let me into that little circle, and he'd tell me about where he'd been, and he wanted to know about my trip. And I have no idea what happened to that store. It closed after I moved away. I don't know where that guy is. But yeah, I'll always remember that, and I'll always have a soft spot for places like that because of how like dialed that guy got me for that summer. It was great.
Yeah, that's a magical experience, isn't it? I mean, and it could completely change how you feel about the outdoor space and whether you feel empowered. And so, yeah, it's, I mean, I think we referenced earlier that we had this boom in outdoor retail in the 70s and 80s. And I know that, I mean, one thing I think that is important, really important to acknowledge is how difficult. Of course, I'm not an owner of an outdoor. I am an owner of an outdoor business, but not an outdoor retailer. Really tough business. I mean, it's you've got this inventory that you're carrying. You're dependent on the weather. You're dependent on the changing tastes, and now, of course, you throw in Amazon and the internet and all that other sort of stuff. So I am so sympathetic to the challenges that that those folks have to face. I mean, it's a tough business. And now, of course, we have direct to consumer from, I mean, I don't know a major brand that doesn't do direct to consumer at this point. So that is eating into it. And now you have brands like backcountry.com starting their own product and selling it to wholesale. Thanks a lot, backcountry.com. It's a really challenging business. On the other hand, I have also found some of those folks, certainly not all of them. I mean, there's some very progressive and I don't understand, things from their chair. So, but who've tended to be closed-minded, and tend not to be open to new things. I've been on press trips where there's retail buyers and there's shop owners and things, and they tend to be really conservative. And maybe that kind of business does force some fiscal conservatism, which maybe then leaches into creative conservatism. I don't know, but I mean, I want to share one. It's a beef. I want to share one story. I had a friend who is really passionate about AJ in print and works with independent retail and a network of independent retailers. And he paid for us to send 2 copies of AJ in print to this network of 100 and some outlets, 60 plus stores. And basically saying, I believe in what Adventure Journal is doing. I believe in that these guys are an important voice. I believe in independent retail, in independent media, and these two should come together. These guys are really thinking about the role of media and how it can help retail and blah, blah, blah. And so they paid for us to send out, however many 100 magazines it was, with an introductory letter and just wanting to connect us to independent retailers. And when we first started, I was like I was still no to Amazon, but like, we're not going to go be an REI. We're not going to be a traditional. I really believe in independent retail. Out of the 60 some letters we sent out, we had one response, one, and it was Wes Allen at Sunlight Sports in Montana. And Wes is one of the more progressive, thoughtful folks who, in independent specialty retail, and they do carry AJ. They continue to carry AJ. But I was really struck that people didn't even acknowledge that we sent them these things. They were so, and again, I'm not sitting in their seats, so I don't know where things are coming from them. But I was like, to me, it spoke to a lack of openness and even having a conversation. And from their perspective, they're like, it's a magazine, what's my whole, so I'm making a couple bucks off it, but like that wasn't really the point of the introduction. That's not really the point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to be an important voice for the culture, and we're thinking about things culturally. And it's just, so there were a bunch of lessons I took away. One, maybe these folks are closed-minded, or maybe their business is just really difficult. But we've had a lot more experience from getting Adventure Journal into shops, at the shops that you would call boutiques, like Proof Lab. And so, let's shift into talking less about REI and more about independent retail, but also into talking about like this new model or new way of thinking about outdoor retailer, which is, Justin and I were talking off mic about the boutique. Well, you tell them, like, what's your take on the word boutique?
Well, I mean, it's funny because like that word kind of crept into the vernacular of like retail. Well, it's always been there, but like into a place where I'd want to go within the last like 10 years. Like boutique to me was always like where like my grandma would shop. Like that was always a boutique. Emma's boutique, Annie's boutique, like small towns always had them. So the word boutique itself has been a little bit harder for me to kind of get used to. But man, they are like, right. So I live in a town of about 7,500 people in Marin County, pretty small town, one street downtown. There's probably 4 places that I would call a boutique that have like an outdoor element to them. So places where you could get at least a little splash of something that's going to be camping oriented. And that might be everything from like a travel mug, but like a cool one, like a fashion forward sort of travel mug, to I just bought like a super nice flannel at this new store that sells like, it's all like après stuff. So like stuff you're going to wear after skiing or surfing or whatever. But it's I would like, this is outdoor apparel. Like it's legit technical outdoor apparel made super well at a one-off boutique. So they're popping up. That's kind of, I feel, but that store is also awesome to go to. Like the other day, we had a little Christmas party downtown. They had hot toddies, they had beers, they had music. Like it's a place I went back because I was like, oh, that was fun hanging out there. And I would go there now. They have like a little area where you can sit and read books. There's a phenomenal like wine boutique in the next town over, wine and beer boutique that has like Foster Huntington's books and like a little reading nook where you can get like a nice beer and sit in this amazing window and read awesome outdoor books and buy them. Like there's this like blend of different interests that you might have kind of coalescing in what I refer to now as like a boutique, these outdoor kind of boutiques. And it's a cool space.
I don't think any names really apply. I mean, I can't stand the word glamping. I can't. It's an awful word, but because I don't think being in a cabin is glamorous. It's just not sleeping on the ground, maybe. But I think that it captures that element of something that's different. And I don't also really like the word bespoke. I mean, bespoke to me traditionally is, well, it's custom, right? It's not fancy. It's custom. And then there's artisanal, which is a cliche and easy to make fun of. Yeah. And I don't.
They're just like little. I mean, boutique. I also like the word boutique because it sounds so bougie, even though these are super bougie stores. But they're just like curated well, but that's a description. That's not really like a name. I don't know.
Can we have third wave outdoor? Is that what this is?
Yeah. I mean, kind of. Yeah, it sort of is really.
I mean, kind of. First, you had to go to your mercantile and in dusty Main Street in Dodge, Kansas, and then you had your REI and your independent retail. Maybe we're on our, because that's the type of retail that I see that I get really excited about, and I know I just threw some independent retailers under the bus. I want to say I know that business is hard. And I know you probably are, it costs you money to buy things and stock them. And so you're probably less willing to take risks. But what I see in these new retailers is more of a willingness to try things. And I think that this speaks to a change in the outdoor culture, which has traditionally been about Acme experiences, getting to the top of the mountain, sort of the specialized model of like fast over innovator die. And it's just getting more relaxed and a lot more, I think, realistic. And, I think the retailers that I'm excited about, and it's not like I'm not excited about traditional old school retailers like, I don't know, Neptune Mountaineering in Boulder or Elephant's Perch in Ketchum, Idaho. I mean, I love shops like that.
Cool,
but we have actually the kind of one of the coolest shops in Orange County is called Seed People's Market. And there's in Costa Mesa, there's two retail malls basically across the street from one another. One's called the Lab Anti-Mall, and there's an Urban Outfitters, and there's a Buffalo Exchange, and there's a couple cool vegan restaurants, and there's a coffee place, and there's a sneaker place, and it's more of an urban, mallish kind of thing, but it's all outdoor, super hip, super cool. And then across the street is what's called the Camp, and that's where Seed People's Market is, and I don't know if they're a big Patagonia retailer. I don't know if Patagonia has a piece of it or not. Patagonia is extremely well represented, but you see, they have Rourke, and if they don't have Outerknown, they probably should.
They probably have Filson.
They have Filson. They have Danner. They have Cedar Summit. And that's actually a place that I go to discover brands, like because they will bring in these small and local brands, like a leatherworking brand. And they don't have hard goods. You're not going to buy a tent there. You're not going to buy probably a technical backpack there, but pretty much everything else. And then they have another side that is more what you would think of as traditional boutique, where they have jewelry. They'll have, they have journals and things like that. They have kids stuff upstairs. They kind of have housewares. They have used things like used housewares. Cool. It's a very dynamic place. And as far as events, the Camp area, this sort of outdoor mallish area, they will have events. I don't know that Seed actually has its own events. Well, they do. Actually, one of Brendan Leonard's, Brendan was there for a book signing, and we went. And so they do stuff there occasionally. But I guess what I like about it is that I go in and I recognize myself, both who I am now in Patagonia, right? Like the Black Hole Duffel, the new Black Hole Duffel that we just reviewed, that you can go see our review on YouTube. I'll go in there and I'll see a Black Hole Duffel, and maybe I'll see a new colorway that I didn't know was there. I'm like, oh, that's me. I recognize myself. But then I'll go over to these other areas and there will be a new shoe brand. And so there is that joy of discovery. And it's also maybe sort of that a little bit of that aspirational element. Like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to look my age, so I want something that's a little bit younger. Yeah. Well, these guys, like, they have this new colorway from Rourke or whatever. And that's where I think that these boutique or third wave or whatever we want to call them, that's where I think that they're excelling, this openness to be more curatorial of new brands and expose us to new ideas.
The aspirational thing is big. That's I hadn't really thought of that, because I mean, like a dirtbag shop, which is kind of the way I'm thinking of the older school ones, right? Even if they're not like whatever negative association you might have with dirtbag. Like I'm thinking of these older school mountaineering shops as like a dirtbag shop. Like they're aspirational in a completely different way, right? Like you could go in there, talk yourself into getting into some pretty big adventures or something like that. You could, that people are probably in here buying some stuff to go to places that would scare the hell out of you, right? So like there's some aspirational thing on that side. But maybe, when I was sort of talking about how surf shops have done a pretty good job of surviving the online retailing onslaught, I hadn't really thought about the aspirational aspects. Like that's probably more important than like serving espresso or having like beer nights or whatever. It's a way to, I mean, those are cool. Those are great. But I mean, like that could be an element that adds to why you'd want to go into a place like this. I mean, that's because you almost see like the camping aspect as as just another part of this lifestyle that you'd like to be a part of, right? Like they also probably have awesome candles and like maybe some stuff that has nothing to do with anything you're going to do with camping. But it's still like it's a pleasant place to be in because the style is great, and you're like, I'd like to ascribe to that style. There's something to like there.
Yeah, that's another whole can of worms to unpack, the whole idea. And we talked about that on one of our recent episodes with Cassie Abel of Wild REI, of the fashion versus function kind of thing, and how the idea that you have to look bad to do these things
Right. Totally.
is thankfully dying. So I do still get inspired when I go to shops.
Yeah.
One of my local bike shops, South County Cyclery, I've known those guys for 30 plus years. When I'm going to the shop, I know I have to budget an hour because I know I'm going to be there talking, mostly going to be listening to Carl Bauer talking because he's an Energizer buddy. But like whenever I talk to him, like I come away with like all these trails that I thought I knew every trail here. I don't know every trail. You know, I get excited and he gets me fired up. And so I think that's like retail at its best. I think that's probably harder to get at an REI. I think, you know, the big box element of it's harder to make maybe connections with people, those personal kind of connections. But where I'm coming to with this is I think that one of the things that has changed dramatically of the internet era is that we have access to all kinds of inspirations and all kinds of things that we can aspire to. Whereas previously, maybe you went into the shop and you saw that Black Diamond equipment poster and you know you saw there was a mountain that you'd never seen before and now you saw it on a poster, and it was because the only way that you ever saw these things previously was, you know, in a shop or in person. Now of course they're all over the gram and the TikTok and, you know, all these other things. So this is this thing that we think about with Adventure Journal in terms of what we put in Adventure Journal. And I think that shops have to be really cognizant of this, is that so many of these things that you would get through this traditional venue, a shop, you can get anywhere. You can get them on Reddit. You can get them all over the place. And so we have to reinvent how, like, as a shop owner, as a shop customer, we have to reinvent how we think about these things. And I think that's what Barnes and Noble is. They're starting to do that, right? They're reinventing, and maybe they're going back to sort of that old third place coziness of an independent bookstore. But I think that we need to be really, as shop owners and as shop purveyor, like customers, we have to think about what we want from them, and that absolutely has to change, and it is changing. You know, these places that we're referencing, and I know that one of the things I'm really excited about in 2024. We're going to be, with every issue, we're going to be covering an independent shop, and this is an area where especially people of traditionally underserved communities have the potential, I think, to create and connect with new communities or to rally. I mean, one of the, we don't have our full lineup, but I mean, one of the shops I'm excited to cover is Outlandish in Brooklyn, Black owned. You know, kind of checks off a lot of these boxes that we're talking about: open-minded, diverse brands, really exciting. And one of the things that I suspect a lot of us have shop fatigue, where we go in and we see all the same brands that we know. We may love them, but like, I don't want to go in a shop and see, you know, nothing but Mountain Hardwear in Patagonia. I want to see something from Parks Project. You know, I want to see something from Ripton. And so I think these new shops can give us this sense of novelty while also connecting to their unique and local community.
Well, and one thing we haven't touched on at all, and you know, I suppose this might really go without saying, and to a certain extent, you have to be in a situation to where you can afford to do this. But it's one thing to talk about what like a shop can offer the customers, or even just a culture, right? Like a culture of a certain outdoor pursuit in a certain area. Like they can offer this culture something, but I mean, it's also up to us to support these places. And you know, like I get a big thrill out of buying something from a local shop, from a local independent shop. Maybe not a big thrill, but I feel good about doing that. I mean, the one thing about REI, if we're going to Yosemite in 6 days, I probably have everything I need. If I have forgotten something, I'll go to REI, I'll buy it. I won't think it'll be purely transactional. I won't really think much of it. I needed this, now I have it. That'll be the entire thought process. Whereas like when I bought this flannel from the store down the street the other day, like I'm stoked that I supported them. Like I've already had a couple people say, "That's a great shirt. Where'd you get it?" "Oh, this place. You should check it out. It's awesome." You know, and like small town vibes. Like I want to support that. This town is famous for Fairfax doesn't have any chain stores of any kind, right? And like that's not easy to do in 2024 now, almost. And you know, like that to me is worth that's worth preserving. And so, that's something else that is probably worth talking about, is that for the most part, you're probably going to, not always, but you might pay a little bit more. I mean, it feels like prices have kind of like stabilized between like a lot of, unless they're on sale, like something is MSRP at REI, it's going to be MSRP at fancy boutique down the street. But, I just feel like that is something that everybody knows, but like, support these places. Like if they mean something to you, or even if just the concept means something to you, like that's worth a few extra bucks, in my opinion, or waiting longer. I mean, like you can get anything you want online tomorrow, but like maybe it's worth ordering it from your local store. Like, oh, we don't have it, we can get it in a week. Like great, okay. Like I feel like that's again, it kind of goes without saying, but if these things matter to you, it's worth supporting them. It's worth going a little bit extra because it feels good to shop in them. It feels good to be in them.
I'm going to put it back on the shops. Yes, I agree with what you say, but I'm also going to put it back on the shops. Is like, you have to be a place that makes it feel easy.
That someone cares about.
Well, that makes it easy for me to have a relationship with you.
Yeah.
Ideally, personally, with the person who owns the shop or runs the shop or works on the shop floor, but also that is welcoming. And if I have a relationship with you, not just because you have goo packets and I can run down and get goo packets,
right,
which I can get anywhere, but that I could go and I can connect with you, and I feel better putting a few of my dollars in your pocket because of what you've given to the community. And so I think that, and everybody has to reinterpret this in their own way, whether it's movie nights or shop rides or whatever. But I think that it's the shops that are reinventing the experience and thinking of themselves as a cultural and community resource. And the best shops have always done that. And I mean, even these traditional independent retailers that we're talking about have always done that. So, but I think as the world is changing, where we have this flattening and the ability to get whatever we want yesterday at a discount, then what takes its place? Well, what takes its place is what everybody is hungering for, which is connection and community.
Right. And maybe you shouldn't be getting that from products. What I mean? Like, but that's
I don't know. I mean, this is it's just one anecdote. It's not really a data point, but my friend Ben started the Coast Film Festival here in South Orange County in Laguna Beach. And one of the reasons that he started it was something that we've talked about since we worked together at Powder many, many years ago, which is there aren't places in Orange County, even there are millions of people who are diehard adventurers here, or hundreds of thousands, I don't know what the number is, but there's lots and lots of people who are super passionate, that there has never been one of these sort of general outdoor places for people to come together. There are surf shops, there are bike shops, there have been ski shops.
But the general thing, yeah.
But that kind of general thing, which is always going to be a challenge for a title like Adventure Journal, or somebody has like general outdoor shop above their door, as opposed to like a hardcore specific place. And I think that he's been very successful with it. And people have come from all over the country for this. And Jeremy Jones was here this year, Obi Kaufman, all kinds of really fun, cool people. They partner with Hobie, which is a chain here in South Orange County, but one of the original surf shops that continues to do a fantastic job. And they're increasingly partnering with Rivian, which bought the old historical theater in downtown Laguna, which is also now starting to do events. And I bring this up because I've been to 2 events at Rivian already, and I'm going to another one next week. They're showing, it's a film about soil and farming. It's called Common Ground. And Rivian bought this theater, restored it. It's a National Historical Landmark. They also created a little shop where you can buy almond surfboards. And they opened a coffee place that's, I think it's Equator. Is that right? Equator. It's a woman owned from Santa Cruz, I think.
Oh, are they in Santa Cruz?
I think they're in Santa Cruz. Yeah. NorCal somewhere, Central Cal.
Pretty sure. I think they're actually in Marin. I think they're based here.
Okay. But you go in, there's this little tiny little retail space, and they've got Rivian swag and whatnot, but that they've curated a few other things. And I bought a little book from Almond about like a guide to longboards and stuff like that.
Cool.
Not that I need it, but I wanted to buy something there.
Yeah.
I like the size of it, and I'm thinking maybe we should do little books like this. I don't know, but like I felt really connected to what Rivian is trying to do there, and kind of this sense of community. And so it's like you have to build it before they will come. I think there is a hunger I suspect there's a hunger on the part of anybody who's listening to this podcast who wants that kind of experience in stores. And maybe they have that at their local retailer. If they fantastic. But I know that we all want community and we all want connection. And that I think that is a place where retailers can do that because we can get the stuff anywhere,
Yeah.
But
Totally.
only you with your unique perspective on the outdoor culture can give us your version of that to be drawn to.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like that.
So, well, maybe that's a place that we should wrap up then.
Probably.
So, thank you all so much. I really appreciate listening. Your most valuable thing is your time. So thank you. Your second most valuable thing probably is your money. So again, pitch. If you love adventure, you will love Adventure Journal in print. It is adventure-journal.com. The usual things apply. Please subscribe. Please leave us a rating. And, maybe most important of all these things, we really do want to hear from you and your take on what we're talking about, not on what we said, but maybe on independent retail, on REI. Totally. We don't have a set time frame that we're looking, but I would love to do listener feedback episodes, a couple times a month. I mean, and get more voices on there. So you can send us a voicemail to mail@adventure-journal.com.
If your local outdoor shop doesn't have any kind of third place feel to it, if you don't feel like that community exists like in person, that's us. Like talk to us, tell us what's going on. Like I think that'd be great. I mean, like there's no reason that we can't be a digital third place for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and also I thought you were going to say, but if you want to give a shout out to places you would love, let us know. We can put them in the show notes.
Actually, that'd be great because we're going to be covering them in print. So yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we would love to hear it. All right, you've heard enough of us for today. Thank you. Over and out.